Hi, soulful beings. Welcome to Sitting with Ourselves. This podcast space is for the deep discussions and reflections on many different aspects and areas about life and ourselves. From psychology, mental health and well-being, to philosophy, life theories and concepts, and topics related to our society and beyond our world on Earth, we'll have conscious conversations with thought-provoking perspectives. This is our place of being, healing, and staying grounded with our souls. Hi, soulful beings. Welcome to the Sitting with Ourselves podcast. In this episode, we explore through the delicate threads between the heart and the mind. In sessions where psychology meets poetry and science embraces the human experience, today we're diving into a question of conversation related to love. How do you know if you are in love with a person, the idea of them, or simply the feeling of being in love? This is an interesting discussion we can have sitting with love, and I'd pondered about this question several years ago, and it came back to me as a topic to talk about a bit and delve into. I remember my closest friend and I had talked about this before a long time ago, and I can't remember the details of what we said about it and agreed upon with an explainable answer from our understanding and thoughts at the time. But now I'm here to talk about this topic and share the pondering. It'll be interesting to see if I see anything differently to how I did years ago about this question versus now. Let's begin with what it means to be in love with the person. Loving someone truly and deeply means seeing them as they are, not the curated version they show to the world. Not the idealized figure shaped by our longings, but their unfiltered realities. It's the loving way they furrow their brow when they're lost in thought, the way they ramble when they're nervous, the way their voice softens when they talk about things that matter to them but frighten them too. It's noticing the awkward quirks that they think no one else notices, the way they tap their foot absent-mindedly when they're thinking, the way they collect strange facts about the world because it makes them feel less alone. It's cherishing the unspoken dreams they carry close to their heart, even when they don't quite have the courage to say them out loud. Being in love with a person is about taking them as they are, with all their flaws that make them human, their raw and vulnerable side, all of their whole being. Seeing that and still loving them anyway, despite it all. Just a side note that we are not talking about you accepting or tolerating toxic behaviors or abuse. Rather, this is about not loving them for their potential or your expectations for what they could be. It's about accepting them truly as they are and liking them for them. Philosopher Martin Buber spoke of the I-thou relationship, a sacred, rare kind of meeting between two beings. In an I-thou moment, we encounter someone not as an object, not as a function of our own needs or fantasies, but as a living presence, whole and irreducible. To love someone in this way is to resist turning them into a character in our own story. It is to step back from using them as a means to an end, such as a source of comfort, validation, or success, and instead meet them as a soul walking their own mysterious path, just like yourself. It's meeting them where they are, as they are. It means holding space for their autonomy, understanding that they are not here to complete us, fix us, or perform a role. They are here simply to be themselves. This can connect to the psychology concept of attachment theory. When we love the person themselves, not our idea of them, our attachment is secure. It's built not on fear, control, or fantasy, but on authenticity, on the willingness to see and accept. Love in this form recognizes imperfection as not just inevitable, but beautiful. It fosters intimacy that deepens with time, rather than fades when the gloss of novelty wears off. Let's think about what this could look like in the tangled and imperfect reality of daily life as an example. Imagine that you are dating someone who is ambitious, their eyes always on the next goal, next mountain to climb. You admire this about them. But over time, you notice something else. How the fear of failure gnaws at them when no one is looking. How sometimes their ambition isn't fueled by joy, but by the terror of not being enough. Loving them isn't insisting they become someone who always believes in themselves, or pushing them to stay positive. It's sitting quietly beside them on the nights they feel small and lost. It's seeing the dreamer and the doubter. It's choosing to be present for the whole messy, beautiful picture of this person, this human. It also means asking yourself this hard question. If they never changed, never grew in the ways I secretly hope, if they remained forever a mix of dreams and fears, brilliance and fragility, would I still love them? If the honest answer is no, if you realize you are clinging to who they could become rather than who they are right now, then perhaps you are not in love with the person themselves, but with their potential. It is so easy, almost heartbreakingly natural, to fall for someone's potential. To see the extraordinary possibilities blooming inside them and imagine a future they could have, a future you could have with them. But real love is not a blueprint. It's not an architectural drawing of who someone might be one day. It is standing beside them here and now in the unfinished story of their life. Now let's move on to the second layer, being in love with the idea of someone. This often happens subtly, almost tenderly, without us even noticing. We meet someone and before long, our mind begins to weave, stitching together glimpses, gestures, and dreams into a tapestry far more vivid than the threads themselves. We aren't in love with the actual person before us. We are in love with the possibility of them. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato spoke of the notion of ideal forms, that everything in our physical world is merely an imperfect reflection of a perfect eternal blueprint. A tree, a horse, a table, none are as flawless as their ideal essence. And sometimes, without meaning to, we treat people we fall for in the same way. We craft an ideal form of them in our minds, a version free from their human contradictions, messy histories and baggage, and hidden fears. In our imagination, they become perfectly wise, perfectly kind, perfectly attuned to us. They become the balm to every wound we carry. But what we are really loving is not them. It's our own longing reflected back at us. Cognitive psychology calls this idealization, a cognitive bias where we fill in the blanks about a person's character with the traits we hope they possess. We see a few bright sparks and assume there must be a roaring fire behind them. We project kindness, intelligence, patience, depth, even when those qualities have not yet been shown or not consistently. Let's think about this for a moment. You might be drawn to someone's charm and confidence, assuming that these outward graces must mean they are emotionally mature, steady, and safe. But confidence is not the same as care, and charm is not the same as character. Or maybe you're dating someone who is mysterious and quiet, and you find yourself painting their silence as profound, imagining depths of emotion and wisdom stirring beneath their stillness. But sometimes silence is just silence. Sometimes it masks not depth, but discomfort, difficulty, or disinterest. We create these versions of people because we long to be seen, to be loved, to have our own emptiness filled. There is tenderness in this impulse, but also danger. A tough but necessary question to ask yourself here is, am I in love with who they actually are, the full and flawed human being, Or am I in love with the story I've written about them in my mind? Because sometimes we are not loving the person standing before us. We are loving the novel we've authored about them, chapter after chapter of our own desires. Let's imagine this in an example scenario. You're sitting across from them at a coffee shop you both love. The late afternoon light is pouring in and everything feels suspended in gold. You watch as they stir their coffee absent-mindedly, eyes distant, distracted. You've spent months, maybe years, believing that if you just loved them enough, they would open up to you, that their silence was depth, that their distance was mystery, that their absence was poetry and not avoidance. And yet here you are, reaching again, asking gentle questions, offering all the tenderness you have, and getting back only vague smiles, half answers, walls dressed up as windows. Something inside you softens and breaks at the same time. You realize they are not hiding hidden depths. They are exactly as they seem, and you have been loving the idea of a person who does not exist outside your imagination. It's not that they are cruel or that you are foolish. It's that you were in love with potential, the whisper of what could be, rather than the quiet, complicated reality of what is. And maybe in that moment, you feel both sorrow and mercy, for the story you have to let go of and for the person who was never meant to be everything you dreamed of. You might catch yourself thinking things like, if only they opened up more, they'd be perfect to me. Once they get past this phase, they'll be exactly who I need. They have so much potential if they just did this. And the list can go on. Notice how often the word if appears in these thoughts. If is the language of idealization. In contrast, real love for the person speaks in the language of now. It says, I see you as you are today, not as you might be tomorrow, and I choose to stand here with you. There is something both heartbreaking and liberating in letting go of the version of someone we hoped they could be. Heartbreaking because it asks us to grieve the dream. Liberating because it invites us to love or leave based on truth, not fantasy. In Plato's world, the ideal form was untouchable perfect, but always out of reach. In human love, the beauty is not in perfection, but in the touchable, fragile, breathing realness of another soul. And then there's being in love with the feeling of love itself. That intoxicating rush, the dizzy butterflies, the flood of anticipation from a simple late-night text that makes your heart skip. In these moments, it's less about the person standing before you and more about how they make you feel, how they awaken parts of you that long to be seen, desired, chosen. Existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote that in certain forms, love can become a subtle act of possession. Instead of loving the other person as a free, sovereign being, we unconsciously use them as a mirror, a way to affirm our own existence, our own worth. For example, thinking, I am loved, therefore I exist. When we are addicted to the feeling of being loved, we aren't connecting with the other's reality. We are seeking our own reflection in their eyes. In these cases, love becomes less of an offering and more of a hunger, a beautiful aching need to feel alive. And the other person unintentionally becomes a vessel for that experience. Neuroscience shows us why this pull is so powerful. Falling in love lights up the brain's reward system with a surge of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, chemicals linked to pleasure, joy, attachment, and even addiction. The high can feel almost drug-like, a kind of euphoric intoxication that convinces us that we've found something eternal, when in reality, it might just be a spark that's burning too hot to last. For instance, some people may always seem to be in love with someone, not necessarily the same person, but the feeling itself. They leap from whirlwind romance to whirlwind romance, chasing the honeymoon phase like a traveler forever chasing the sun across the horizon. Then as soon as the excitement fades, when the conversations turn mundane, when flaws in human ordinariness appear, the feeling slowly fades, melts away, and so too does their affection. It was never really the person they were in love with. It was the rush, the sensation of being chosen, of being wanted, of being needed. You might recognize this pattern in someone or yourself in subtler ways too, such as the restless impatience when the magic dulls, the quiet yearning for the next grand gesture or the next emotional peak. A good way to gently check yourself is to ask another question like this. If all the excitement faded, the butterflies, the late night calls, the exhilarating uncertainty, would I still want to share a quiet Sunday afternoon with them? Would you still find joy in the small, wordless moments, like the laundry folding, grocery shopping, coffee sipping ordinariness of real life? Perhaps even just being in their presence and you both doing nothing at all, just sharing a space in the stillness and the quietness. If the honest answer is no, if the thought of the mundane feels unbearable without the constant buzz of excitement, then perhaps what you are truly in love with is the feeling of being in love, not the person themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a flaw, it's a human longing to feel alive, desired, electrified by existence. However, sustainable love, the kind that deepens and roots itself, often blooms in quieter soil. It is not a fireworks show, but a hearth, a slow, steady flame that warms without burning everything down. To love someone is not just to love the highs they give you, it is also to love them through the silences, the ordinariness, the soft and imperfect realness of simply being. So for some deep self-reflection, how can you tell the difference between whether you love the person, the idea of them, or just the feeling they evoke in you? Here are 4 points we can think about. 1. Reflection and reality checks. Ask yourself, do I know this person's flaws, fears, and insecurities? If you can't name their struggles or have never seen their vulnerable side, you might be in love with an idea rather than the person. 2. Consistency versus euphoria. Does your love feel steady, grounded, and warm, or is it solely built on emotional highs and lows? Real love grows in stability, while the love of feeling often fades when the initial spark dulls. 3. Who are they without me? Consider, do you love them for who they are independently of what they do for you? If your love hinges on how they make you feel or what they represent in your life, it's worth examining whether you're truly seeing them. And 4. The longevity test. Imagine your future with this person, not the fantasy version, but a real one. Can you picture ordinary days together where the magic isn't sparkling but simply simmering? If your vision of the future relies on constant excitement or grand gestures, you may be chasing the feeling of love. Now, I'm going to close our talk session with a gentle thought in that love is a mirror, but it's also a window. Sometimes we stare so deeply into the mirror of our own desires that we forget to look through the window and see the human standing before us. True love in its purest form is both a reflection of our own growth and an unclouded view of the person we cherish. So, as you think of someone you love, ask yourself, am I holding their hand or just the silhouette of who I wish they were? Until next time, soulful beings and thinkers, remember that the mind may spark love, but the soul keeps it burning. How cheesy. See you in the next episode, and I hope you've enjoyed this talk today. Stay lovingly grounded. See you next time. Bye.